on that path. So, Ryan, you had just mentioned, we were just kind of chatting a little bit around Hero and some of the AI strategies that we were doing and we're doing as an organization. And you were actually you advise a lot of companies. You not only came from the data space, you've been the CEO of a company and so forth, but I always feel our conversations, you're always at the forefront. You're always thinking about things, and it's not the bleeding edge, it's the leading edge. So the bleeding you just don't want to be there. It's the leading. And you were just commenting on, my statement around, I think what's unique about Ambassador's AI play is we're playing in that feedback spot versus, where a lot of them are doing SDR, sales tool or support tools. And then I kind of had mentioned a little bit around, but when they do play in AI, it's just regurgitating a FAQ page or what they have in their database. And you were starting to talk a little bit around, when as you advise the companies that you're working with, you're starting to see the same thing. For the listeners, can you reiterate that again? Just kind of the things you're seeing and what the forefront is around this AI agent and kind of how businesses should be looking at it.
Yeah, sure. I think the AI agent development is really intriguing in the sense that it lets companies go out of not just regurgitating information, but meeting a consumer or a business lead at the moment that they're willing to engage, right? And that moment could be on different channels at different times. But for most people, stepping out of your flow, whether it's your daily flow, whether it's your workflow, and someone taps you on the shoulder and says, "Can you please stop what you're doing and give me some feedback?" It's not natural. If you're actually in the vein of doing an activity and you're prompted or have this very fluid ability to come in and provide the feedback as it's happening, I think that's where some of these new AI tools make it much more cost effective for companies to be at that right moment and get even higher quality feedback than they've ever gotten before. And so as a good example, if you look at a lot of the advancements with AI and voice agents, all of a sudden now, think about retail employees. You can meet them on the floor. You can get feedback right when something's happening, and they can pick up a phone. Maybe they don't sit in front of a computer every day. And suddenly, this whole new vein opens up where you can provide just-in-time feedback on something that's going on, something that didn't work with a product, the service that was difficult, etc. You can call in. Everyone's got a mobile phone in their hand. Really easy, right? If you have to remember that feedback, come back to your desk, write an email, or jump on a chat bot or something, it's not always the right time. Maybe it's not even the full amount of feedback you would have gotten otherwise. So I think it's really a game changer that you can really become multimodal, right, with AI, because it is cost effective to inject yourself across any of those available channels wherever you can meet the person who's providing feedback.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I love your opinion on this because, your background obviously extends into data at Axiom. And then, you served as the CEO at PrizeLogic, which I actually think PrizeLogic is probably one of the leaders in the early days of loyalty and so forth, and kind of this, what would become the SaaS movement for loyalty and beyond. To your statement here, as a CEO, business owner, or C-level, when we are looking at automated tools in the loyalty is really around customer engagement and retention. When you think about the AI tools, how would you think about it from a C-level if you were going to go look for a platform like an Ambassador or within the realms of it all? Because I do think that, and even with us, as we're looking at tools that are AI driven, sometimes you're going, well, is this real? Is this going to help me? Is this really going to move the needle? Is this really in an automated fashion? How, from your standpoint of where the market has shifted to where it's going, and then as an executive, how do you make this decision to purchase an AI forward tool?
And I think, Geoff, it's a really interesting time out there because of AI. Not only does it create these new tools, but it also puts into the mind of consumers out there whether these experiences are authentic, right? You see everything about deep fakes out there. You see the amount of spam, all the sorts of communication problems that are coming up because AI can make that complicated. That's one of the things I love about what you're doing at Ambassador, right? So figuring out how to get consumers to advocacy is about making those authentic connections. right? And one of the best ways to do that is when you can drive it through somebody you know or a brand you trust, right? And so I think that's where you're able to take AI, take that company data, go ahead and connect up an experience. And it could be a simple referral, right? You've done that for a while. It can be trusting a brand through an affiliate network that you've earned trust with, right, over the years. And so you're excited by that. It could be through feedback bots. So you have access to that company data, and you meet them as a trusted entity at the moment they're ready to give feedback. And I think that might be overlooked. We're so focused on brand, marketing and broad-based outreach. It serves its purpose, but I think people are going to become more skeptical because of AI. And I think they're going to need these authentic connection experiences. So after designing you know, thousands of promotions, loyalty sites, rebate sites, all this kind of stuff, where Fortune 500 brands are trying to connect in fun and engaging ways with their consumer at a moment that matters to them, right? I think that is even getting more challenging. And I think some of the tools as a platform ambassador is providing and enables a business to connect with, whether it's B2B or D2C, I think those are going to be more relevant than ever because I think they're going to struggle to trust out there. AI is just too fast. It changes too much. And you have to know the source, right? And when you trust the source, I think the quality of that lead, that referral, the advocacy, that feedback is going to be much higher than it ever has been.
So that's interesting. You kind of start to talk a little bit around from the consumer side. So, one of the things as we look as a business, the tagline that we've come up with to move forward is the most connected AI feedback network in the world, right? So we think that there's going to be this wrapper component that Ambassador is going to have inside of a brand's ecosystem or inside the consumer experience and so forth. I think for me, the one thing that I'd love to get your opinion on, because I'd be curious some advice for Ambassador as well, that the authenticity, I believe, sometimes can get lost if a brand purchases a SaaS subscription because it's known to the consumer they're using some other product, right? Is this really the authenticity of the brand? Is this really it? Or is ChatGPT or AI just making up this conversation that really isn't the brand? The brand is just trying to hop on whatever bandwagon. And I don't mean an AI bandwagon, but I mean a bandwagon of, oh, this is how I need to communicate to this market to just get more dollars. So my question to you is, I'm curious how the consumer or how SaaS companies, I guess it's how SaaS companies who are selling into large brands can create that authentic component for the brand's customer, right? So when you are building a platform like Ambassador, we are building it for our clients' customers. I mean, that's really it. As the Ambassador business, how can we be thoughtful when we build the product to ensure the authenticity to the client's customer?
So I think a lot of that comes down to how you connect for distribution. So in the end, Ambassador being a little bit of an Intel Inside type tool, right? The authentic experience happens because you think you're part of the brand. When we used to build promotional websites, we didn't build a PrizeLogic promotional website with our branding on it to connect up with Pepsi or Molson Coors or Samsung or something like that, right? We went ahead and built them their branded portal to create the moment for their brand, right? The fact that we had our own SaaS, microservices and engines and things behind there to power it, the consumer doesn't care. They need to know it's safe and it's authentic and it was for the purpose in which that site was designed. I think the same thing is true for Ambassador, right? So the AI is a tool. It's going to allow you to connect and get the different capabilities of Ambassador out there in new and flexible ways. But you're going to have to embed it into the workflows of a brand. It's the only way to make it really authentic. And honestly, I believe that's what brands really want, right? They're trying to drive traffic to their properties. They want to control their brand experience. If you can plug this in, behind the scenes and really drive an improved end user experience, I think that makes all the difference.
It's interesting. So really, it's about building a platform into the current workflows of the organization of the brand. But how do you still keep the authenticity alive? Because you and I have had a lot of conversations about this, and I'm sure you saw this at PrizeLogic. You know, I think brands know their product really well. They
Hmm.
obviously understand their clients well enough through the data that they get. But I think sometimes, based on the feedback that they're getting, there are decisions that are made. We do it too, that maybe are not effective to the customer base, right? So for us, we look at each of our accounts, and when we look at them, we actually determine at what level they're at in terms of churn
Hmm.
capability. Well, if you just look at an email or a phone call our CSM has, some of those accounts are green, but then they end up churning and you're going, wait a second, what? And that's why we built Hero. Is I'm like, this doesn't make sense. What they're telling us is different. And so
Hmm.
what we did is we created Hero to be an authentic bot that doesn't have a goal in mind to drive a conclusion or to drive a sale. It's to have the open-ended, or to have the ability to keep the conversation in a very authentic manner. And so, maybe I'm answering my own question, which is it's keeping that openness of authenticity for the platform that we've created. But I do know once you start to give it to the brand, there are a lot of politics and a lot of rules and a lot of things where, like, no, 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 they can't go outside the walls. The walls are here. This is how we need to be asking the questions. Or but then all you're doing is driving an inaccurate survey or an inaccurate review and so forth.
Right.
How can a brand be thinking about that? Maybe not so much around ambassador, but how can a brand, when they start getting these new AI tools, as you were saying, that are digging deep into their workflow, where
Yeah.
almost they can get a mindset shift? How can they be thinking about these new tools that might kind of get
Yeah.
outside the norm of that possibility?
So I think an interesting piece is, right, think of big brands, how long they've hired agencies to help them in areas where an agency brings expertise, right? So this is what's interesting about AI. AI as a tool is great. When you think about what you do, let's say create a custom GPT, right? That has a purpose in mind. It has a certain amount of prompt engineering to drive certain kinds of outcomes. The difference between, say, maybe trying to tackle that in-house and built it with your own skew and belief, sometimes you can get a little trapped where you're building an inside out view because of those, whether it's politics, whether it's how I believe the product should work or be received, etc. And you bring those biases into your AI solution, right? When you work with somebody who specializes, who only thinks about this for all brands, is what's the best in class way to go ahead and drive that feedback, right? You have an opportunity to go build something that is universally powerful and could be tweaked by industry, right, et cetera. But you also know the limits of how far do you really want to take that before maybe it's not authentic feedback anymore and it undermines itself, right?
Hmm.
And so you actually provide that buffer then to the brand.
Interesting. Okay. So now let's kind of take a we as a brand have now implemented something like this. How does a brand, because you and I talk about this a lot from a
Mhm.
balance sheet standpoint, financial standpoint, how does a brand start to look at AI from a tool that, because a lot of people are saying, I can replace so and so, I can decrease OpEx because of
Yeah.
this, right? And yeah, the more and more we implement AI tools, I'm going, yeah, maybe you can get rid of one, but the AI tool still has to be trained. There still is, as you're talking about, this authenticity and so forth. But as a C-suite, whether you're an SMB or you're an enterprise, it, through your lens, how do you think about AI to the balance sheet and the OpEx and the operating side of the business? Is it really an OpEx decrease and efficiency strain there, or is it just an add-on? Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, in fact, it's a great question. I just got back from the University of Chicago, our booth annual marketing data and AI summit, and this was a topic that kind of came into a number of the presentations. I think what a lot of us are seeing out there is that AI is good at replacing or augmenting or making more efficient tasks, right? We've yet to
Hmm.
get to a point where we've fully been able to say, hey, whole bodies are gone, right? So as a business leader, that's a little bit tricky. We want to hope that we can drive more efficiency with it. Some of it may be more effective. It may, divert or free up time to do things better we otherwise couldn't get to. Um, Whether it fully replaces bodies yet, there's a handful of cases where it's having some more success, and some maybe customer service cases, et cetera. But if you take a look at it in something like feedback, it's really tough, right? How many customer success managers, only spend all day doing feedback? They don't. So if you can make them 50% more effective in getting feedback, that's fantastic, right? You can make better business decisions. You can improve your product. You can, be able to move more quickly. And you might not have otherwise reached that. Does it mean your entire CSM staff is going to go away? Probably not, right? Usually they've got plenty of things to tackle. And so I think that's one thing as a leader, as you invest in these technologies, where are you looking for your return? Are you trying to get out of the headcount, or are you trying to do it by making your business smarter, faster, more responsive?
But in regards to that though, and you and I chatted at the very beginning of this, you can believe what you want, but in Ambassador, we thought that there was a recession in June of 2022. I thought we were coming out of it in January of 24. But just with the current market, I mean, you can say we're still in it and it's just stalling out. And so for those companies that have to be thoughtful about the net burn or the cash component of their corporation, and it can even be divisional, for large enterprise. The first thing is, can I replace bodies, right? Because they are the most expensive thing. But what I'm hearing from you is, it's not the body to start with. Let's see what mundane tasks you can remove first by leveraging AI. Is that kind of what you're saying?
I think that's exactly what I'm
Okay.
saying, right? You're finding these moments where AI can drive some efficiency. It's just not a whole body at a time yet, right? It's certain tasks that are getting more efficient. It may let you extend your staff, it may let you move faster. But outside of, like I said, a few roles where maybe it's helping, um, to replace a whole body, I don't think we're there yet, right? I
Yeah.
don't think it's ready to be completely, unbound, unguided, and just, work on its own.
Hmm. And from that, you said earlier too, it's about making better business decisions by using AI tools. Curious about, the bet that Ambassador is making is, in order to make better business decisions, it's specifically around the feedback. And so, because
Hmm.
we believe that in order to get feedback, that's going to help you understand how your clients buy, why they churn, why they contract, or why you can upsell, cross sell them. And it really becomes the baseline for it. My question to you, when you led companies, divisions, and CEO of companies and so forth, when you stepped in as the new CEO, because that's what you did in two companies, you came
Yep.
in, right? And there's always fires, there's always things going on. When you started, at what point did you start at? Because I think sometimes that's where AI can be the thing that helps a business more. Is we're betting on feedback. I think there's other companies that are betting on, no, it's the leads. Go get more leads. It can be more efficient, or customer support. I'm just curious what your thoughts are, and it doesn't have to be around Ambassador, but maybe what are the first things that a C-level, when they're looking to implement it or improve their business, where should they start with AI? What are the things that they should start with?
Yeah. So there's some areas where I'm seeing some traction. I've got one company that I advise who has actually built an entire strategic rubric, so they can come in and analyze an entire business from the ground up, feed it a corpus of data, and come back and start to make strategy suggestions, take a look at the market, and do some pretty cool stuff. Again, it's interesting because as a CEO, strategic planning isn't my only job, right? It's a job. So that's an example of a tool that could help me, save time, get down to some things for us to brainstorm as a team, collect a bunch of the feedback from the group and maybe accelerate the process being a new CEO, as I come in. Does it mean it has all the answers? Absolutely not. Is it going to replace the team doing strategic planning? Absolutely not. But can it move things further a lot faster? Sure. Right. Just the same as, more familiar concepts with, taking meetings, for example, right? Now the ability to transcribe, summarize takeaways and notes where you don't need an admin or someone to stop doing their normal tasks so that they can write emails and do summaries and things, right? It's a task. It doesn't replace that entire person's job, right? But it does make them more effective. It lets them spend more time on the right things in the business instead of just regurgitating information, right? And so, as a CEO, obviously, you're always going to say, where could I be more efficient? Where could I invest to go ahead and drive better outcomes? I think that the AI lens, though, isn't just a cost cutting, right? And looking for ways to eliminate resources and people. That's one possibility. But I look at it, if you want to transform a business, if you want to drive, a more strategic growth in a business, how can you move faster? How can you make more of the decisions right the first time? How does that help me? How does that help my team, right? Explore the possibilities and bring their best ideas forward. No CEO knows all the right answers, right? That's why we surround ourselves, just like you do, with a great team. When you bring that to bear and they have these tools at their disposal, imagine how much quicker you can move, right? You can test ideas and theories. You can see if they hold any weight. If you have a feedback agent like Ambassador where you can get that feedback live and quickly, how much faster can you iterate? How much, quicker can you adapt to what the market needs? Not because we believe it in a closed room with 10 of us sitting in a room brainstorming, but because we heard it firsthand from our customers saying, if you could just do this for me, right? And every great growth business has been through this trajectory. Many of the big unicorns you see out there didn't start with that as their original idea. They end up listening to their customer and the business morphed, right? I mean, look at Amazon. They're a bookseller. They listened to their customer. They said, "Oh, if you can sell me a book, you could probably sell me some other things too, because this is working pretty good," right? They listened, and there's lots of examples right throughout corporate history. But I think that's where this is powerful. How much more quickly can you iterate? And if you watch a lot of the different news out there, there's a lot of speculation. Who's going to be the first one person, founder who's going to have a unicorn? Right? Because you have all these tools. Now, I think that might take a little longer than everybody is suspecting, but it's an interesting idea, is how do you deploy these as assistants to your team in the right way? Just be careful not to overdo it. There's a lot of new technologies where people go too far too fast. Right? They deploy the technology for technology's sake. Hey, I think I can get rid of my entire customer support team because I have some AI bots, right? That may not be the best case. I mean, you might actually stop getting the right feedback for you if you were to go that far in. There's certain knowledge and escalation that you build into a customer support team, and it has a lot of value. So figuring out how to apply these technologies at the right place for the right task is, I think, where people are going to get the best bang for their buck in deploying the AI technologies.
Yeah, I was just speaking with Rami the other day, and that was actually kind of along the lines of what he was saying as well. He actually said at one of his companies, they implemented a customer support bot, and it was so automated that they had phenomenal NPS scoring and great CSAT scores. They implemented it, and within 30 days, it tanked because their clients became so upset because when they were calling, they became so frustrated with the bot when normally they would have somebody, and everything just started going like this, and they couldn't figure out what it was. It was just a simple implementation of the bot. So they reversed it and said, okay, how can we use the bot? And if, let's just say, somebody is getting upset, can you just quickly have a customer success rep grab that call and turn it around or flip it around? So yeah, to your point, it can go too far. It really can. Yeah. I think kind of just wrapping up the conversation here, I'd love your opinion on kind of the macroeconomics and what's transpiring today. You do have a lot of C-suites, you do have a lot of entrepreneurs who are dealing with the macroeconomics and what's transpiring. Everyone has their view on it. they all have their own crystal ball if they're smart enough, and they're betting on, hey, this is where I think it's going to go. And, some are going to get it right and some are going to get it wrong. And speaking with Rami yesterday, he had a really good point where he said, yeah, look, this is uncharted territory. We haven't seen something like this. I mean, the amount of money that's sat on the sidelines, and even going to a VC summit, it was a private one. They said the same thing. They're like, this $1 trillion that is sitting on the sideline, usually it sits and then it comes into deployment within 6 to 12 months of it sitting. We're now in some of these cases, it's going on 3 years of it just sitting there, getting close to 4 years. So, as an executive, one, what does your crystal ball kind of tell you? And then two, what's some advice for those of whether it's SMB entrepreneurs and so forth, and those that are, maybe in their corporate jobs at an enterprise company? What are some of the things that they should be thinking about based on your crystal ball, Ryan? Because I think you're very versed in this area.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think we went through a long cycle chasing growth, right? With the change we've had in interest rates, obviously the tariffs, a lot of the global uncertainty, we've had more wars going on and things kind of getting in the way of knowing the path forward. And that's a risk profile. So anyone who's lending money or investing money is kind of saying, well, if I don't know where the future, it doesn't seem so predictable and something could change quickly, maybe I'm going to be a little more judicious. The cost of money has a real cost again, instead of being down at almost 0% interest rates, right? So now all of a sudden you're going, hey, I can't take that really risky bet because it can take a while to pay off, and I'm fine with it. Now it's like, oh well, I lost the money I would have otherwise had if it sits in this investment too long. And I think there's an interesting intersection there, because those tools we've been talking about with AI, it lets an SMB, right, a founder, a smaller team, start to bring to bear some of the measurement tools at scale that you need to show and demonstrate quality, right? It's a new world. You can't just say, I got this really cool idea, let me do a pitch. Why don't you throw some money at it? In portfolio theory, we only need a few of those to hit. It'll be okay. Try us on. I don't think that pitch is working anymore. If you look at VC money deploying, if you look at private equity has been trying to work through its last round of acquisitions and figure out smart ways to deploy capital. What they really want is they want to see founders and entrepreneurs who can show them with some data that this is quality. It's not just a gamble. And I think that's really changing. So when you can deploy these tools and do what some large companies can do to prove that, right? That, but you're a startup, you can suddenly now get on that same page. I think that's a game changer. As an example, if you're able to give feedback firsthand of what your customers are saying, and it backs up what you say as an executive team, it's a lot easier to walk in the door and say, let me tell you why. I can go ahead and rinse and repeat this strategy because I have all the customer feedback telling me this is a great thing, right? I have people putting, their own reputation on the line with a referral, let's say, right? And saying this is a great product. I want to go into it. There's nothing more certain when you're looking at, investing on that front than when you can say, listen, I've got the playbook. I've already proven it and I have the data. What I need is the capital to go ahead and do it at scale. That is a flight toward quality versus the let's try an idea and see if it sticks. And I think that's what people are looking for.
Can quality though come from, because some of the conversations that I've had with that quality is, well, it's not the hockey stick, it's not the strong growth. Can quality come though in the form of, but we're still growing, right? We're still growing while lowering net burn. Eventually it'll be EBITDA. Eventually it'll be cash flow positive. It's taking time to get there, but it's a very methodical chess game, not checkers. And instead of like, oh, it's this, hockey stick type movement, are we seeing companies now that are being more thoughtful around that? And I'll use an example, and this will kind of give you a little bit of a story. I have a good friend of mine raised some money. I won't say who it is, but raised some really good money. It was his Series Seed, really decent price range. And he thought he'd be raising a Series A after 14 months to 18 months of doing it. And he's like, no, I'm actually going to see if I can make this thing cash flow positive. I have 4 million left of this capital round. And I'm like, I don't need to raise again. I'm actually don't want to raise again because I don't want to go into an environment where it's going to increase the risk profile. It's all this. I would prefer to take slower growth than have this hockey stick movement where I just got to go raise more and more money, which actually puts a higher risk profile in the business to see an IPO or to see a 500, 600, 700 million
Hmm.
dollar exit. My question to you then becomes is there a new thought process coming about with CEOs and so forth? Because you know, I still hear that, well, it's not a hockey stick, it's not a hockey stick, but it is actually less than what I heard before. I'm now hearing more about, is it a healthy business? Are you
Hmm.
lowering the net churn or the net burn? Are you doing these things? And I'm curious through, what do you think in your crystal ball this new world looks like? I mean, is AI really transforming an entire way we look at a business and its metrics?
I absolutely do. I think that when money has almost zero cost, you can deploy it differently, right? And as we kind of move back, things change quite a bit. So I think of like Jeff Green, CEO of the Trade Desk. So he did this even when money was fairly free. He did one A round, right? Focused his team on the business model of how do I get cash flow and positive and self-sustain this business so I don't ever have to go do it again, and until he IPO'd, right? I think you're going to see more of that kind of model, right? Because why? You've gotten past your MVP, you've proven there's a market and a product market fit, and you've got enough data now collected that you said, okay, I can show you this is where I can go find more customers. They're telling me that this problem needs to be solved. So that first round is now help me scale that. Once I get there, I've got to be smart enough to have a business model that makes money now, not 20 years from now, right? Free money let you go ahead and push that off, and you can wait until your Uber scale before you finally get cash flow positive. I just think that's going to be a rarer instance now that there's a higher cost of capital, right? And so executive teams have to think a little different that way. And all these great AI tools can let you test and try different theories. Think about pricing permutations, different go-to-market strategies, get feedback faster. How do you go ahead and figure out how do you get to that moment where you're now self-sustaining? You can make a lot of great decisions once you hit that, right? It's hard when you got to keep going back and asking for help and support, and trust me that this is coming and it'll be great when we get there. But there's a little more risk in this environment right now. So I think executive teams have to think a little different.
Yeah, I actually didn't correlate the two of those where it's the expense of capital, right? When it's
Mm.
cheap, you can push off that cash flow positive. And I started one of my companies where it was like raising money was I mean, I couldn't I had to say no, like, no, we don't need anymore, right? Now, having going through a couple of capital raises and so forth, it is more difficult. Like there's more scrutiny toward it because there's a lot more deals too that I've heard that people
Hmm.
can look at, right? When before it
Yeah,
wasn't, they were almost competing for whatever deal they could get.
that's right. And it may feel a little bit like it's a larger burden for the executive team than maybe in the past, but I think it's a good thing. It means that people are looking to bet on more quality businesses, not just volume of businesses, right? And when you put together a great team like you have at Ambassador, I think you're opening up that runway. Right, you're
Yeah.
going to figure out how to get past that first round and get self-sustaining. You're nimble. You guys work really well together. You listen to your customer. You're willing to pivot and try new things and get the business there. And I think once you've set that model in, it's off to the races. You don't have
Yeah.
to answer to anyone else because your customers are basically helping you self-fund it because you provide more value to them than they're paying for you. And that's
Yeah.
a great thing. And I think more businesses are going to have to figure that model out. It's a new era.
Yeah. Last two questions for you. One is what in your mind as you look to this new wave or this new wave of capital or how we think about businesses, what are the three things that differentiate for you a quality business? So as a CEO, as an entrepreneur, as an owner of a division, when you want to look at quality and be able to really see the other side of whatever this macroeconomic is, what are the three things that you, Ryan, look for, whether you're
Yeah,
investing, you're advising? What are the three things that you're looking for?
that's a great question. I think that the three biggest things to me are, product market fit. Do you really solve a problem? Do you know what that is? right? And do you know your buyer? I think secondarily, you need to have a great go-to-market strategy. If you can't sell it, you can't reach them. It doesn't matter how great the product is if it sits on the shelf. A lot of businesses come up with great new products and just can't get them out to market. And then I think the last one still comes down to culture. I think it's building a great team that is able to come together to solve this problem, to deliver value for a customer that they're passionate about and believe in, and is willing to do the hard work. It's not easy, right? If it was, everyone would do it. But when you build that kind of culture and everyone's pulling for each other, it's amazing how much feedback you can take, how fast you can move, how much you can innovate and create value. And when that happens, customers stay with you, they grow with you. In fact, they give you the best feedback you could ever get, right? So when you have all three of those moving, I think you can get there. If you stay the course.
And the last question, advice, your last piece of advice. So, you got a lot of different people listening. You have ambassador clients, you have customers of ambassador, you have business owners, you have SMBs, you have enterprise division holders. What's something that you want to leave the group with to be thoughtful around, whether they think about technology or the market or both?
Yeah, I think that sometimes it feels like the word advocacy might be a little overused, but as I mentioned earlier in the talk, I think with AI, it's going to become more important than ever. I think that trust is going to be paramount to making decisions going forward. The speed at which content is saturating all of social media, in which deep fakes and AI can, create a lot of uncertainty around, can I trust this? I think people are going to go back to the sources that they know personally, right? That whether it's a business that they've had great experience with and has treated them well, whether it's on the consumer side to family and friends and people that they know in a circle to recommend a product. I think that's going to come in and start to play a bigger role. And I'm really excited for what you're doing at Ambassador. I think it's the right time, and I think it's a great solution, and I think people are going to need a lot more of it.
The authenticity is a real key thing. I mean, when we started the business, the theory, at least to why I did it, is, as a consumer, I choose brands now the same way that I choose my friends. And there's a level of trust, caring, authenticity, and so forth. I think you're right. With technology, brands, not on purpose, have moved away from that. And I think the consumer is only looking more and more for that. And so can brands meet them where they're at? Because the consumer is going to end up going there. And I agree with you that that authentic component is really important. So, well, thanks for your time, Ryan. I appreciate it. It was a good chat as always. And we'll do it again. I appreciate it.
Wonderful. Thanks, Geoff, for having me. Really enjoyed it. Thanks.